Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Terrence McCrae, and today we have an exclusive show. The Close the Deal show is speaking today to one of our future candidates that is running for San Francisco's mayor. His name is former Senator Mark Leno. Welcome, Mr. Leno. Welcome to the Close the Deal show. Thank you for coming on.
Terrence, you're very formal. You know, you can call me Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's definitely a pleasure to have you here. Sir, so many people are trying to become the next mayor of San Francisco on June 5th, 2018.
That's right.
What type of relationships have you established as a candidate for San Francisco mayor?
You're talking about relationships with the other candidates or with people in the community?
I'm talking about relationships with people in the community.
Sure. So, just a little bit of background about myself. Been in San Francisco 41 years. I started a small business, a sign-making company, 1978. So we're having our 40th anniversary this year.
Okay.
And then as my business grew, I got involved with community affairs and community service, serving on different boards of directors and volunteering my time. And my community service became public service overnight when then Mayor Willie Brown appointed me to a vacancy on the County Board of Supervisors. And then I had the opportunity to serve 4 years on the county board, then got elected to 6 years, 3 two-year terms in the state assembly, subsequently 2 four-year terms, 8 years in the state senate. So now it's suddenly 18 years of public service through serving as a representative for San Francisco, the very best district, of course, in the state. So over those years, one makes a lot of contacts, works with a lot of advocacy groups and a lot of advocates for different issue areas, worked on a lot of wonderful policy challenges such as criminal justice reform, affordable housing, renewable energy, water conservation, protecting the quality of our air and water, fighting climate change, transportation issues, education issues, opportunity for higher education. So through all of that work for all of those years, a lot of contacts are made and a lot of relationships are made.
Sounds like to me you have a lot of experience.
I do.
So my question to you,
Yeah.
Mr. Leno, what do you see
Mark.
as the biggest challenge to building new development in San Francisco?
The challenge is to building new developments. Are you talking about commercial developments or residential developments?
I'm talking about developments with the issue of homelessness.
Okay, well, we know that homelessness is a very serious issue in San Francisco, not only in San Francisco, but up and down the state of California, as well as across the country. But because the price of housing is so significantly higher here, we have even greater challenges to housing our people. And unfortunately, of course, the federal government has literally turned its back on cities and counties and states. In the good old days, the Department of Housing and Urban Development actually built affordable housing in our communities. Unfortunately, that's a day long gone. So we're left to deal with it on our own. I have a very serious and detailed plan, and your viewers can catch it and read it at markleno.com. And I think you've got a copy of it here.
Yes, actually I do. You're talking about ending street homelessness in San Francisco by 2020?
By 2020, my goal is to end street homelessness. And I can tell you briefly, it's very detailed in the plan, how we're going to do that. So we have about 3,500 people living on the streets of San Francisco right now. We also know from the Department of Building Inspection and the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing that there are approximately 1,500 empty, available, single-room occupancies, SROs. Those are the little rooms with the bathroom down the hall, our most affordable, below-market rate housing units. And I don't believe that a day should go by that the mayor of San Francisco is not in earnest negotiations with the owners of those properties to find out what reluctances they may have, what hurdles there may be for them to lease those units to the city for the purpose of housing formerly homeless people. So we need to make things right for those owners. For example, if there's concern that there could be a mental health crisis or some incident related to drug or alcohol abuse, that the city will be there with the wraparound social services to keep that formerly homeless person successful in his or her housing. And then negotiate a price.
So what separates you from your other components in solving these solutions?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, I'm experienced. So whereas the other major candidates, not unlike myself, have served on the County Board of Supervisors, I'm the only candidate in the race who has also served 6 years in the State Assembly and 8 years in the State Senate. And so I would bring all of that experience, along with my experience of being a small business owner for the past 40 years, to the office of mayor. And I can't explain how important it is that our mayor be experienced, not just with a few years of serving on the Board of Supervisors, but dealing with larger issues, statewide issues, and working with elected leaders from other parts of the state, because it's going to take partnerships to be able to solve these regional issues like homelessness and housing affordability.
What about car break-ins?
Our increase in property crime is also very significant. And let me just state that my campaign is a change campaign. I believe that it is time for a new direction at City Hall, that we need fundamental change, that the status quo is not working for anybody, for families, for business owners, and for unfortunate souls who are living on the street, and all of those who are suffering all of these auto break-ins and home burglaries as well. You know, the number of car break-ins have tripled just from 2011 till today. Tripled. What happened? Why didn't we consider it a crisis when it doubled a few years ago? We had to wait till it tripled. And so now, finally, the leaders at City Hall are focusing on it. And we seem to have turned a corner. We hope that that is going to be a trend. In the past 12 months, there's been a decrease of about 17%, still far too many. A year ago, there were 85 a day, 30,000 a year. So if we're down 17%, that means about 82 a day, 81 a day. That's still far, far too many. And one of the ways we're doing that is through a public relations campaign called Park Smart. If you love it, don't leave it. And so we're communicating that with all of the tourists that come to San Francisco, so they get that message if they're on BART or at Muni. If they're in a cab on the way to their hotel, they'll get that message when they check into the hotel. The person that hands you your key is going to tell you, leave your valuables in your room, don't put them in your car, and get that message again when they get to their room and turn on the television. So we want people to park smart. And of course, everyone who lives in San Francisco hopefully already knows that. If you love it, don't leave it, because we know that this is organized crime. International crime rings are doing this. Yeah, there's the anecdotal person down on his or her luck who's going to break into a car to get something quick. But if there's nothing in the car, they're going to move on to a car that has something in it.
Well, you have a bunch of people sitting at home, and ideally, they have a few questions for you. You can call in at 415-861-6648 to ask Senator Mark Leno any question as to your reasons why he should or he shouldn't become the next mayor of San Francisco. However, my question to you is,
Yes.
right, how are you going to be able to pay for this homelessness matter? Are you going to use tax dollars, or where's the money coming from?
Terrence, it's a good question. You're asking all the good questions. You're asking the tough questions too. So I believe, and it's pretty self-evident, that when we begin to move people off the street and under a roof, there will be a cascade of savings throughout city government. For example, the Department of Public Works is spending about $30 million annually just to clean the sidewalks, another $30 million to clean the streets. But they've got to come back every day because the streets are a mess the next day and the next day and the next day, and they're never really clean. Have you looked at the streets lately? They're a mess. And so we're spinning our wheels. We're spending tens of millions of dollars. It's not getting better because the dirty streets, that's not the problem. That's the symptom of the problem. The problem is that we've got 3,500 people living where they should not live. And when people live on the streets, they leave waste. And so once we move people indoors, there'll be a lot less waste on the street. There'll be savings at the police department because police spend an inordinate amount of time of their day dealing with homeless people. If they've got a place to go, that's going to produce a savings at the police department. Also, at the fire department, fewer ambulance runs to the emergency room. There'll be savings at the emergency room, at General Hospital, at the Department of Public Health, because the longer people are on the street, the more their physical, emotional, and mental health degrades, and that's more expensive for taxpayers. So when we get this problem handled, there'll be a lot of savings. We can direct all those savings into the services that we're going to need to provide to keep formerly homeless people successfully housed. And I also want to make sure that we squeeze greater efficiency and effectiveness out of our current budget. We have a $5 billion general fund budget, nearly all of it discretionary spending. I can't imagine anyone would argue we couldn't get 3%, 4% greater efficiency out of that big budget. That would be $150 to $250 million right there.
Sounds great. You know, when you speak about moving people off the streets, there are actually homeless people in the Hayden-Ashburn area who don't want to leave the streets. How do we address those type of people who just stand out in front of the store and literally solicit whatever donation that they could receive?
Right.
How do we address that?
So I'm not here to say this is going to be easy or there are not going to be challenges. There will be. But we know from experience that somewhere in the neighborhood of 70, 80% of those who are living on the street will accept a shelter or navigation center bed if we could provide it for them. Unfortunately, we've not expanded our capacity for the 1,000 people who are every night on a waiting list. So the vast majority would like to come in off the street. So then there's a slice of folks who don't. Who are they? Many times they have mental or behavioral health issues and they're left on the streets untreated. Some are dealing with alcohol and drug addiction. And then some may be involved with illegal behavior and they don't want to come in. If there's illegal behavior, guess what? We've got to bring law enforcement in for that slice of it. Being homeless is not a crime.
Correct.
But if you're committing crime on the street, then you need to face the law and there should be consequence. So we need to take, it's a very diverse population. People make their way to the streets for a wide variety of reasons. Sometimes people are evicted because they missed a paycheck. You know, 65% of workers are living paycheck to paycheck. So if you get sick and can't go to work for a week, you could lose your apartment because you can't pay your rent. We also know that there are no-cause evictions, thousands in recent years, no-cause evictions, which I want to stop. 70% of those living on our street were living under a roof in San Francisco before they became homeless. So to the degree that we can keep people who have a home in their home, we're already improving our homeless situation. So no-cause evictions means you are paying your rent on time, and you're a good tenant, you're a good neighbor, but your landlord evicts you because they're abusing a law called the Ellis Act. Now the Ellis Act, I don't want to give you too much information here, but the Ellis Act is a statutory right specifically for landlords, specifically to go out of the business of being a landlord. They have the right to evict all tenants. But what we see now in a very heated housing market is that the law is being abused not by landlords, but by speculators who don't pretend to be landlords and buy buildings with the purpose and intention to evict everybody so they could subdivide and sell the units off and make a profit and go on to another building and another building. And we're losing our affordable housing stock of rent-controlled units because of these speculators abusing a law that was not written for them or for that purpose. I would take them to court. We have to stop the no-cause evictions.
Now, that's information that you just informed the public as a strategy.
Yes.
Something that is not only useful, but something only someone with experience could be able to take care of. None of the other candidates are identifying what you're talking about the way you're talking about it. It's a clear picture.
Yes.
However, I have another question for you.
Okay.
You know, there are a lot of issues, not only homelessness as being a problem in San Francisco, right?
Correct.
But What about small businesses?
Yes.
If you become mayor, how are you going to address local small businesses in development?
Sure. So, as I mentioned already, Terrence, I've been an owner of a small business for 40 years in San Francisco. Started as a one-man shop, single operator, making signs on a large letterpress, setting cold type on type bars, a very antiquated way of printing from the 15th century. Gutenberg technology. Of course, over the years, computers have come into the industry, and now we have full-color digital printers. So it's amazing how the technology has improved the kind of signs and the way we make our signs. But I'm very familiar with the challenges of running a business and making sure that we stay on the right side of all the regulations that the city puts on us, and paying the taxes that are necessary, and keeping a clientele happy, and then also being able to keep up with rising rents. So I have a very soft spot in my heart for small businesses, and I know the challenges they face. When I was on the Board of Supervisors, I created the legislation that put a small business commission at City Hall. So there'd be a place for small business issues to be addressed, and legislation that goes through the Board of Supervisors that impacts small businesses needs to go to that commission to be heard. There's a lot of bureaucracy that needs to be cleaned up that impacts small businesses. I can give you one example. The manager of my business told me that she wanted to get a new DBA. That means doing business as. So the name of our business is Budget Signs, but we wanted another name to do a different kind of promotion for a different variety of our product. So she needed to go to City Hall to fill out a form and get the new DBA, so we'd be operating under the law. She told me that 30 phone calls and 6 months later, she still didn't have her DBA.
Wow.
Now, that's just frustrating. It wastes the time, and a small business owner does not have time to waste. The day is completely filled with obligations and making sure customers are satisfied and getting the job done and being there on time. And that needs to be fixed. The customer service desks at the Department of Building Inspection or the Planning Department or any other counter is there to serve the public. And right now, the public gets the runaround where you got to go to that department and that department and that department. We've got to consolidate. We've got to make things customer service friendly, especially for small businesses.
That sounds wonderful, because in actuality, you're bringing back the morale, and it sounds real good. However, how are you going to be able to balance the budget
So,
with addressing all these issues?
of course, by law, we have to pass a balanced budget. So that's a challenge, especially if the economy goes south and we lose some of our revenue sources. There are times when we've had to make painful cuts, and those are tough times because real people suffer when the city and county government's not able to provide the services that taxpayers are deserving of and dependent upon. But I think that there's a way, as I mentioned earlier, I'm looking for greater efficiencies in the budget. I don't think we should be going to the voters to increase taxes until we can assure them that we're spending every dollar we're collecting currently as efficiently and as effectively as possible. So there are a couple of ways of doing a budget. One is the traditional way, which is the department head submits next year's budget to the mayor by taking the current year budget, putting a little on top for next year, and asking the board and the mayor to pass it. But when doing that, there's not a lot of review of what projects worked, which programs were successful, and that's where you don't find waste, fraud, and abuse. But there's another way to create a budget. It's called zero-based budgeting, and that's what it sounds like. You start at zero, and you line item by line item build your budget. And that way you review every program that you're putting into your budget. If a program meets its goal, meets its mission, and does it within budget, that's the kind of program we want to reinvest in. But if there's another program that didn't meet its goal, didn't keep within budget, well, we don't want to reinvest in that. So we've got to be able to find out which is which. And sometimes, and I've heard this from past experiences at City Hall, sometimes there are programs in a budget that are there in name only. There is no program. but it's there just to fluff up a department's budget. We can't afford that luxury anymore. We've got to know exactly what's working, what's not working, so we can better serve the city and do it within the budget that we've got.
Now, if you become mayor on June 5th, 2018,
Yes.
in your first 100 days in the office, what approach is your administration going to take
Sure.
and goals they're going to achieve?
So since I've made a real focal point of the campaign, the issue of ending street homelessness by 2020, that certainly will be a top priority should I be so fortunate to have the support of the voters on June 5th. So we'll be moving ahead with that on day one. There are a lot of commission appointments that need to be made by a new administration. There are, of course, department heads to be hired. And I am not here to tell you that I know so much that I know exactly which department heads should stay and which ones need to go. But as you've mentioned, the theme of my campaign is to shake things up at City Hall. We need change. Some of the folks at City Hall leading departments and some of the bureaucrats have been there 25, 30 years. And we need some fresh eyes, some new energy. And so, again, I'm not here to presume. I know exactly where the changes need to be made, but I know the changes need to be made. And I will do a managerial and performance budget, review of all the department heads and all the departments so we can make sure we have the best and the brightest leading San Francisco forward.
Sounds not only wonderful, but very clear. Please, for the San Francisco viewers, could you put this in order of importance for you? Transparency of government, fiscal management, city resources, accountability of government employee and public servants, and economic development for local businesses.
You have touched on all my favorite issues, Terrence. And like a parent, I can't choose among my children which is my favorite. But I can tell you that I don't think that the important points you just mentioned are mutually exclusive. I think they can all be moved forward and they can all work together without one taking a priority over the other. We want transparency and accountability in every aspect of city government. The voters of San Francisco deserve nothing less. There should be nothing hidden. Taxpayer dollars are running the government. Taxpayers should know what the government is doing. At the same time, we of course want economic development. We also want transparency and accountability in that economic development. And so, as I mentioned, I think all of the points that you mentioned, one infuses the other.
One last issue
Yes.
that I wish to ask you,
Okay?
and I notice it to be a major problem in San Francisco, because I've spoken on it many a times on my show,
Sure.
public restrooms.
Yes.
How are we going to tackle this issue where there's times where people are being discriminated from using a restroom in a public place? It may be a place of business. How are we going to prevent a lot of defecation from the homelessness on the streets and urination in public where kids are being prone to seeing this type of unnecessary behavior,
Yes.
inappropriateness? This lewdness is wrong.
Yes, it is.
How are we going to address this?
So again, there are many reasons that people are using the streets as their public toilet. If someone's living on the streets and doesn't have a home and doesn't have access to personal hygiene, doesn't have access to a shower, you can understand that a private business owner may not want you coming in their door because they've got customers to serve. And we might want to encourage them to open their restrooms for people coming off the street. But we also have to respect it's private property, and we can't force private property owners or business owners to do that just because it serves the city. So that goes back to my first point, which is let's find a roof for everyone who's living on the streets. And that means under that roof, they'll have their own toilet facilities. And we probably should be expanding our public toilets on the streets. We already have a good number of them. We probably need some more. And then, of course, we've got the benefit of some wonderful nonprofits in San Francisco, like Lava May. I'm sure you know about Lava May, started by a woman who is concerned for the plight of homeless people who don't have access to public hygiene. And she's an extraordinary woman. Her name is Denise. I honored her as my Woman of the Year when I was still in the state Senate. And she has taken old Muni buses and reconstituted them, refurbished them as mobile showers. And so she goes to different areas and parts of town, parks her Lava May bus, and people can come off the street and get a shower and get clean and make use of opportunities for personal hygiene. So that's a public-private partnership. She is in the private sector. She does it as a nonprofit. She does it out of the goodness of her heart. She raises private dollars to help fund it, and I think she partners with the city to be able to expand her services. So you got to be creative. There's no single silver bullet that's going to fix all of this. We've got to be as creative as possible, and I love Lava May, and I know that she's having great success. Other cities are eager for her to come to their city because it's such a creative idea. And then the city also has something called Pit Stop, where on the back of a flatbed truck, we move toilets around so different
Correct.
neighborhoods that don't have public toilets can make use of them.
Now, have you ever heard of Sean Haynes? He has a nonprofit organization called Impact Partners, and he's actually also trying to create a storage place for homelessness who want to go to work in order to remove their property off.
Yes.
So that sounds like a wonderful, wonderful,
That's another very
creative idea. But we have to get ready to wrap up. But before
Okay.
we close,
Sure.
I definitely want to mention, not only to the viewers, but to you as well, Mark Leno. His accomplishments, there are more than just one. He's also increased minimum wage. He's required developers to build affordable housing in every large project, stopping the chemical industry from putting dangerous toxins in consumer products, as well as passing landmark laws for equal rights, marriage, equality, and protecting transgender. Now, we had a former mayor, Willie Brown, and he had a quote, mayors are judged on results. And if you believe Mark Leno has the experience and the credibility to be our next mayor, because he knows how to get things done. I also believe that he knows how to get things done, not from just his conversation, but from his track record. So, close the right deal and choose Mark Leno.